Hello, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural podcast of Gorgon Head. We're going to be covering some Project Gorgon stuff and chatting with a bunch of veterans. Today we have a special guest, Theogore, aka McKringleberry, as our first guest. Welcome. I think we lost you on audio there. I don't know if it came
Oh,
through. Oh, there we go.
nope, nope, here I am. Still here. Hello.
So, funny story, just quick intro. We actually work together in real life, and McKringleberry introduced me to this game, and I've just been loving it. So, we decided to thought that this would be a cool idea to start a little podcast up to get some more info out there from some of the veteran players. So, yeah, let's get into it. First, I have just some kind of general questions before we start going into actual Project Gorgon stuff just to get a background on some on the people that we're gonna have on the podcast. So yeah, let's do it. So how many hours have you logged in Project Gorgon so far, and since when have you been playing? This is a revealing question on your gaming habits.
Yeah. Well, since the start of the new year, I've probably put in over 400 hours, so that's cool.
Oof.
Uh, it's- but overall, I'm just north of about 1,200 hours now. First picked up the game back in 2016, but largely due to the pace of the development and the various content releases, I've only played it in stints. So play it for a couple of months, take a little break, play it a couple of months, take a couple of breaks. So my playtime hasn't been 100% consistent.
Gotcha. Okay. And was the year you started playing it the year that it came out on Steam?
No, it was actually I think 2 years before it came out on Steam.
Oh,
So
okay.
originally I'd heard about it from somewhere, and I don't know, kind of piqued my interest having something that was old school. I just kind of backing up a little bit. Like I kind of missed the first MMORPGs when they first came out. I
Hmm.
started with games like Shadowbane and World of Warcraft. But as my MMO tastes evolved, I kind of learned that the games that the gameplay experience that I was seeking was more like what we have here in Project Gorgon,
Hmm.
or maybe the original EverQuest. So I jumped into this one back in 2016 and just fell in love with it. It's just like it's just quirky, fun, different, and it wasn't like the sea of the same MMOs that were available at the time.
Definitely.
So yeah, and then it was just a matter of trying to convince other people from the guild to jump in and give it a try.
Yep, it seems like it's worked so far. I know you mentioned a couple of people have already been just grinding on it, right?
Yeah, we're all no lifing it right now, and it's great. It's nice having a group of people again.
Oh, definitely. So the next question was kind of already answered it. How did you hear about the game? So were you kind of just cruising through like MMOs? Like did you just basically Google MMOs that you could try out?
I was probably on some sort of a news website. I'm always reading about MMORPG news, so I
Hmm.
was probably on like mmorpg.com or something like that, and just reading of different MMORPGs and happened upon it.
Gotcha.
And at the time, they didn't even have a free demo. It was something um, you could play for free. So you download it and you play it, and you decide whether it was something you wanted to continue to invest your time in. I don't think they started charging until a little bit later. Um, and then yeah, it came to Steam in 2018. Everybody got the opportunity just to convert their accounts over, and then from Steam it was we had a really big launch. A lot of people jumped in at the start of it. A lot more people came back to the game, and from there it's nice having that kind of presence. Whereas before, this game was kind of locked behind this this one website in the far off reaches of space that nobody really knew about.
Okay, gotcha. So I know you mentioned that I know you play WoW and you mentioned another couple games, but what would you say your previous MMO experience is? For the most part, I never got too into WoW, but I played a ton of Guild Wars 2. I played a ton of SOTOR, played a lot of Night Online World, which is I think more like a similar old school type graphics sort of MMO. But what other games have you played and how much time have you put into them, you think?
Yeah, so starting off with World of Warcraft, I continued to play for a very long time up until Cataclysm, and then I quit. After Cataclysm, though, we jumped around from a lot of various free for all PvP MMORPGs.
Okay.
So we were playing titles like Darkfall. We played Age of Conan for a little bit, and then dotted throughout played games like Atlas and Arcade and Mortal Online. Just a little bit of everything. And and then once I started searching for another MMORPG experience, I found out that there's companies out there, like indie companies over in foreign countries that were in the faraway corners of the internet, able to emulate the original World of Warcraft experience.
Hmm.
And so I started playing on emulated servers, and I just continued to play on them for years and years and years until we finally uh, got WoW Classic from Blizzard. And so we got our entire guild in on WoW Classic. We went full ham on that. Had a very long and prolific raiding career. We did a tremendous job. And then after Burning Crusade came out, we no lifed that one. So in the first week, our guild managed to get everybody to 70, everybody attuned, fully cleared Karazhan, fully cleared Gruul's Lair. Like basically just beat all the content in the first week. We were beat, and after that it was like, there we go, we did it. And just, yeah, when that one ended, it went over. We tried New World for a little bit.
Hmm.
That didn't turn out very well, but
Yep.
I'd say the MMO I spent the most time with would have to be World of Warcraft. Like there's
Okay.
nothing that comes close to the amount of hours that I've spent into World of Warcraft. But I'm done with WoW. I've got it out of my system. I no longer have a reason to go back. Retail has evolved into, I should say, devolved into something I'm just not interested in anymore.
Hmm.
But Project Gorgon, it's there's so much to do and so many more hours of content I can see myself spending in this game. I can see myself playing this for a very long time.
100%. Yeah, I think one of the main things about Project Gorgon that I love, just to kind of be sidetracked for a second, is
Sure.
you can find a random skill and then you're like, oh, this seems really cool. And then you dive into that, and then 4 hours later, you haven't done anything that you were originally planning on doing. But I think that's definitely the beauty of this game for sure.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, we had a new player today. He wanted to become a cow. And I was like, okay, I can help you out with that. And then I'd check in on him and be like, hey, so how's the quest going along? He's like, yeah, I found a cave. I'm like cool. Like what kind of cave is it? I have no idea. I found a cave. I went inside of it, he just got lost in his own adventure, and that's ultimately what this game is about. It's not about, hey, you want to become a cow? All right, go talk to this guy, you know, and then that guy gives you a quest. It's not about having a game of dot to dot where every single person is following the same path, going through the same chains. You, it's your adventure. You go into the world, you explore it how you want to, you go whatever direction you want to, and it's nice having that kind of freedom. And some people don't like that. I know some
Yeah.
people are like, but I want to have my hand held. I want to be told what to do. I feel lost, and it's not for everyone, but for those that are seeking in it, like that grand Lord of the Rings type adventure where you're just off on your own in a very unpredictable way. This really speaks to those types of people.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, I was definitely thrown off a bit by the lack of hand holding, which you had told me prior to even trying the game out was the case. But I think after maybe a couple hours, it really kind of meshes together, and it isn't as bad as initially you'd think. Hopefully, at least that's how it is for most people. But I could definitely see how the lack of hand holding, because I think a lot of people just want to be able to kind of zone out on it, which you really can. Um, so a couple more questions before Project Gorgon questions. What other than MMO would you say your favorite genre of video game is?
Ooh, I like sim racing actually. I'm a huge
Oh,
sim racer. So I
ooh,
have a about, let's say, 6 feet to my left. I have this massive 80/20 extruded aluminum sim rig that is built for simulation racing.
holy crap.
So that's my that's my other hobby when I'm not playing MMORPGs.
And I think we've chatted about it before, but it's one of those that actually like shakes while you're turning, and the it gives you like re what's it called? Not reverb, but um,
Just
feedback on the wheel and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. So the wheel itself has a direct drive motor in it, and it simulates the turning effects of the vehicle, so you can feel what the suspension and the tires are doing underneath you. And then the seat itself has these things that are called tactile transducers that just they vibrate to give you realistic sensory input. You can feel when the car's gears are shifting, or when the car is running over rocks on a dirt road, things like
Hmm.
that.
That's so crazy. It's insane how much those have come. I remember back in the day it was basically just like those arcade machines, and now it's you're literally in a race car basically, right?
Yeah, yeah. I can strap on a VR headset and get the same experience where I'm actually in the car. I can look down and I can see the belt buckles. I can look into the apexes as I'm turning a corner. If I'm racing to the end of a straightaway alongside another car, I can look at the other car and make sure that I brake later than that guy does.
Hmm.
So you really feel like you're in the car. It's one of the best sources of movement in VR, because in a car you're sitting,
Yeah.
in a cockpit you're also sitting, whereas for locomotion, when you're standing still in your living room and you're telling a character to move, it can be off-putting because your character
Hmm.
is moving while you're just standing still. So in racing it works very, very well.
Yeah, that makes sense. I have an Oculus, and we've chatted about VR too, and I think one of the big things that they have to overcome is that the standing and running movement. And because I wouldn't consider myself a very nauseous person, or a person that gets nauseous easy rather, and some of those games really like threw me off balance. It was a trip. Um, cool. So next question. If you could compare Project Gorgon to anything that you've played in the past, is there anything that comes to mind? Or I know it's an extremely unique game, but anything feel kind of similar, maybe in combat or questing or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, just because I wanted to, I've played Star Wars Galaxies, I've played EverQuest 1, EverQuest 2. Of course, I mentioned Shadowbane earlier.
Hmm.
I've gone, oh, Vanguard. I played Vanguard for whatever brief amount of time it was launched in, I think in 2007. This game has a lot of those elements. They've done a good job kind of taking some of the best elements and delivering it in a very unique way that still feels like an MMORPG, but breaks a lot of the D&D type tropes that other MMORPGs use so heavily.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, you look at WoW, and in the background, everything you do, there's dice rolls that are being thrown, right, that are determining certain values. Um, here, there's still those dice rolls, but all of a sudden you've got the ability to play as creatures like
Yeah.
animals, and you can mix and match different abilities. And when you first jump into this game and you're given the option to create a character based on whether you're a human or an elf or a rakshasa, you you're not told like, oh, you're going to be a mage or you're going to be a warrior. And you don't get to have that choice either.
Hmm.
And in a lot of other MMORPGs, you go into it not knowing what that class is going to be like. You just pick blindly, oh, I'm going to be a mage, I guess, and start the game, and you're stuck with that.
Hmm.
And you could invest 60 plus hours, let's say 60 as a baseline, plus hours into that class before you realize it's not something you really enjoy, or you don't enjoy how the designers had created that class.
Hmm.
And so in here it's nice to be able to jump into the game, pick something, and all of your skills and abilities are discovered, and you can mix and match them. And if you get to max level with one of them and you decide you want to try something else out, you can just swap it out. um,
Hmm.
I was partying with one of our guild members earlier today, and I was talking with him about loadouts and letting him know that while I was helping him, I'd probably switched between 6 different classes, and he at no point in time was aware that I was switching those classes, but I was switching between classes depending on the utility of those classes.
Hmm.
And so, as far as like an older MMORPG that this one reminds me of, I would say kind of EverQuest in a certain sense. You probably feel a lot more like EverQuest if you play with the hardcore mode on.
Okay.
But that's kind of the closest comparison I can draw. It does so much different that while the graphics can kind of remind us of EverQuest at times, the gameplay has a lot of quality of life and slash modern MMORPG. amenities that don't make the game feel so dated.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Cool. Okay, let's one more question before we go into PG specific stuff. I know you mentioned you had some interaction with the development team, and I think in general they do respond pretty well to criticism and positives, but have you had any interaction with them? And if so, how did it go?
Yeah, yeah. So in the past, when this game before was even on Steam,
Hmm.
there was a much smaller community. And the community that was there, we were helping to flesh out the wiki. So our guild's initiative for the longest time was to create new wiki pages. If there was something that we found that wasn't there, create a wiki. And we didn't necessarily need to flesh it out, but just to get it created, put in some details, and hopefully other people would be able to help us out.
Yeah.
But occasionally we would run into things that didn't quite make sense, or maybe some sort of values that weren't stacking properly, maybe some sort of thing that was supposed to enable an ability, but they weren't enabling the ability. And
Hmm.
so we would submit emails, not even like they use a suggestion. Back then, we would just submit an email to them. And we'd have detailed screenshots of the steps that we chose to reproduce it and what the pictures of the items were, proof that that item didn't give that ability, things like that.
Gotcha.
And they were extremely receptive to our feedback. It might take like a month or two until those things would be fixed in the next patch. It wasn't something that they don't do live patches. There's not a patch that comes out the next day due to a bug that was discovered.
Hmm.
But yeah, it was just super friendly, super helpful, very interactive with the community. Just like we see Jack running around all the time, answering questions for people in chat. Saitan's doing the same thing on the forums, and
Okay.
he's done that for years. So yeah, terrific interactions with the developers so far, um, and yeah, I think that pretty much covers it.
Definitely. Yeah, that's super refreshing to hear because I've gone through some testing for some smaller MMOs and some bigger ones too, and it's like you mentioned, it's one of those things where you put in a support ticket, you don't really have any interaction with anyone actually working on the game for the most part. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's super refreshing. Cool. Well, let's get into some PG questions. So, if there's one thing, combat crafting, trade skill, what do you find the most interesting, and what have you put the most time into in the game?
Oh man, that's a tough one.
Because I know it's one of those things where you can spread your time out among 150 different things. So I know this might be a tough one.
Yeah, that is a very tough one. There's so many different things out there. Um, I'd have to say augury. I probably don't even know if I'm pronouncing it right, but there's a skill called augury. You can get it in Rahu
Hmm.
further along in the game, but you can take various trophies of the dead, like a skull or their guts or something like that, and you can turn it in for alongside of incense to gain a buff. But the outcome, kind of like let's say tarot cards, it's not always good. So sometimes it can be good, sometimes it can be bad. Sometimes when it's bad, it can be really bad. Sometimes when it's good, it can be really good. I haven't um, like used it a whole heck of a lot, but it's a skill that very few people have gone through and put the time into to use it and
Hmm.
utilize it well. But there's so many of those little skills that are just you mention it and somebody else is like, wait, that's a thing. I
Yeah,
didn't know it was a thing, and
100%.
all the time. And it's I mean, again, I've played this game a lot, and I'll be in a party with some of these other veteran players. We're in the middle of a dungeon, somebody brings up something, and I'm in the background wikiing like, wait, what is that? That's a thing. Like, there's yeah, so there's always new skills, always crazy things that people are discovering, which is really cool. I think I mentioned it to you briefly at the end of December that there was somebody that was an animal handler that also got their paleontology high enough that they had discovered a skeletal cat that could be used as an animal, like for animal handling.
Oh, the
And
one that the animal handling has to be above X skill level, right?
yeah, something like that. Yeah, and they have to have their paleontology at 80, I think. Um, but it seemed like very few people knew about this, and everyone was totally stunned to see this creature. It was on the wiki. I think the next day there's a little bit of information about it. Now I've seen a couple more people walking around with the pet, but it's just cool because they don't tell us when the stuff has been added to the game. They add
Hmm.
it, they add it. They let us know when paleontology was added, but they didn't tell us that there was anything else buried in there. They leave that for the players to discover. And even then, if you had picked it up but you weren't an animal handler, like would you have known? Like, would you have known that this was something that was tameable? So really, there's so many skills in the game. It's hard to pinpoint one particular skill that's really like a favorite skill. There's so many good ones.
That's definitely true. And funny you mentioned that. I was streaming some earlier today, and I was doing some treasure cartography, and a guy probably around the same amount of hours as you, just north of 1,000. He said, I've never even seen that skill in the game. I never saw it on the wiki because obviously I don't think anyone goes and reads through every single skill on the wiki. It's probably one of those things where as you learn these skills, you go back to the wiki to reference it. I'm sure there are people who have read through all the skills, but maybe it's something where you don't even remember you saw that. But cool. Yeah, let's move on. I know that there are a couple people who have those special titles that they alone can give out. There's that guy that you were working on with the lemon title. Is there anything quote unquote that you are known for in game?
Yes. So yeah, some people on the server, they kind of have their shtick,
Hmm.
and it's kind of something that's unique to them, which I think is great. And a lot of other
Definitely.
MMORPGs, everybody's identification is through what their character looks like,
Hmm.
and there's like this game, there's not a lot of choice or a lot of variation. You can run into somebody that's built their character the same way you have. So ultimately, it's up to your own persona that you create in game that allows you to identify yourself as something unique. And so, one time, a long time ago, probably I'm gonna say 2 years ago at this point in time, we were trying
Hmm.
to get a party together. We didn't have any bites, and we are just getting desperate. I think we had maybe 3 or 4 people in the party. It may or may not have happened, and so I started saying, "Hey, uh, we're looking for 3 more people to join our party. Free thigh rubs,
Oh, jeez.
like just to get people interested, right?" And next, thing you know, people are like, "Free thigh rubs. All right, I'll buy it. Like, I'll see what this is like." And so we filled up our group and we made it happen, all just because of this like fun, cutesy little joke. It's not like there's a slash thigh rub emote, but and so that kind of became my thing where if I wasn't able to get a group, I'd offer free thigh rubs. Well, fast forward to literally this month. At the beginning of the month, it's been a little over a year since I last played.
Hmm.
I'm in a party with somebody else, and they were asking if I was like high enough skill to be able to do this dungeon. I was like, oh yeah, yeah, I've played this game before. And then as we weren't able to get a group, I offered free thigh rubs again in chat, and he was like, "Oh, I remember you." Like that's my shtick. That's my thing. So it was kind of funny that this one person happened to remember that as something that identifies with me. I created that, and it's nothing crazy or like it's not an in-game feature, but it's just funny. Whereas you got
Yeah.
Greenberg, right? Greenberg also hilarious. Dude's sitting on like a cache of 40,000 lemons. Most
Jesus
people on the
Christ.
server know who Greenberg is. We know what his obsession is with lemons. We don't quite understand his obsession, but the developers do, and we all just kind of think it's a this hilarious little thing that happens in the game. So yeah, it's there's a lot of players out there. They have their own little shticks, and as you get to meet them, you start to discover what it is about them that they've chosen to identify themselves. And you don't really find other MMORPGs that have that because their communities tend to be so divided on different servers.
Yeah.
This one's one server. Everybody's here together, and it's like one big tight knit family, which is really cool.
Definitely. And I'm glad that I think one of the coolest things about this podcast that we can do is kind of bring out the individuality for the community because aren't many super hardcore veteran players in this game, even though it's been out for I think you mentioned almost 10 years, right?
Yeah, it's been in development for something like 10 years.
Okay.
I don't know. I think maybe it was 2014 when the servers first turned on. I'm not sure. I
Okay.
think they had some players early on that were helping with some like pre-alpha testing.
Okay.
But yeah, it's been in development for a long time, and still to this day, it just blows my mind that as I walk through this world and experience this content, that it's all been created at the hands of just two people.
Yep.
That just boggles my mind.
It's pretty insane. And quick side note, do the developers, have they worked on other MMORPGs prior to this project? I think you
Yeah,
mentioned they did.
yeah. So when you actually, even when you watch the video on Steam, they've worked on Star Trek Online,
Hmm.
Asheron's Call, EverQuest 2. So they have experience making MMORPGs. To what extent, I'm not quite sure.
Okay.
But yeah, they've worked on other MMORPG projects and decided to go off and make their own.
Well, super glad they did. So, well, before we move on and I forget, Um, if you are ever watching this in the future, devs, we need to get a special title for McKringleberry that is the master of thigh rubs. Just
Oh
just
God.
throwing that out there. Okay, let's see. What do we got next? So, what is your current favorite build that you run through most of the higher level content with?
Oh, so I in the past I was a bat before I became a fox,
Hmm.
and when I was a bat, I was looking for things that would pair well, so I chose necromancy.
Okay.
And then later on, once I resumed playing the game after a break, I decided to change from being a bat to being a fox. And so I've played with fox and necromancy, um, and it's really hard to pick a favorite because each one has different utility.
Hmm.
So I've really enjoyed playing necromancer. That was a lot of fun. I'll probably go and I'll finish leveling that up. I was like 3 skills away from level 80 on that one. But right now I'm leveling up as Spirit Fox and Priest, which is really interesting because it's all fire, whereas before I was all darkness. So it's totally opposite in terms of damage types. One of them, two different gods that actually don't like each other.
Hmm.
But yeah, I'm liking Spirit Fox and Priest, and I think I'm going to take this one to 80 and really put a lot of time into some high quality gear because the way the abilities stack has a lot of damage over time effects and a lot of really big hard hitting fire attacks.
Okay.
So we'll see where I can take that.
Sweet. So other than the combat and weapon skills, what are your favorite, maybe one or two side crafting skills that you've been really digging into recently?
Hmm, another tough question. Um, so recently I'd say I've been working on flower arrangement,
Okay.
but I do want to start working on making candles as well. The flower arrangement was something that I wanted to get just to help a lot of our lobies to be able to collect resources. I could just put them down for them. They could pick them up, or sorry, they could learn them, and then they could go harvest stuff. But in my attempts to level up my gardening so that I could get flower arrangement up, those lobies turned into level 50s, and so my flower arrangement skills won't be quite as beneficial for them. They leveled up real quick. There's a lot of dedication behind them, so it's been great.
Yep.
But I think I'll probably shift over here to candle making and see how that goes. It's just one of those weird things that I'm drawn towards because it's not something you see in other MMOs.
Hmm.
Like, I just feel like I'll give it a shot and we'll see where it takes me.
Sweet. Yeah, I was looking in. We were chatting about it earlier. I was looking into to learning that one as well. It's similar to the flower appreciation in that it's buffs, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. You place it down and other people go over there and they look at it and there's certain buffs that it applies to them. But they're long term buffs. Like the flower ones are 4 hours. I think the candles might even be like 3 or 4 hours as well.
Oh, interesting. I was actually under the impression that they were like 30 to 60-minute buffs, kind of like the food stuff, but I didn't know that they were getting upwards of 4, 5, 6. That's awesome. Cool. All right. Well, next question. Which map aesthetic or which map do you think is your favorite currently?
Does the casino count?
It definitely can count if you're into that.
I love the casino. I'm not a gambler. I suck at the little loot master games and the monstered mantids. Um, but running around and just seeing players using them, seeing the people that are putting their groups together, the different like the little vendors and shops that are available here at the casino, I think that's really cool.
Mhm.
But I also love the music. It's the music. Every time I enter the casino, that music starts playing. I'm so happy. I'll turn it up a little bit and just listen to it. It's this really funky kind of elevator music that I can jive to, which in the other zones they're kind of like uh I would say like adventure type music, the kind of music you'd listen to in the background as you're running across the open plains, and it's quite fitting.
True.
But here in the casino, the way the mantises have tried to create this entertainment environment for other people, it's just interesting.
Definitely. I totally agree. Well, while we're
Um,
on this topic, I will go ahead and hop into the game and I'll throw the casino sound on so we can listen to it in the background for a bit.
there you go.
Oh, is the music not on? Oh, it says it is. I'm not hearing it.
Maybe leave the casino and come back in again.
Ah, okay.
Another zone I like is Gazlik. I just love it for its scale, but it's one of those things that they currently have plans to rework, just
Okay.
because it's just kind of thrown together and it's this great place. But it's huge, massive mountains, lots of trees. It's just a very cool, literally cool place because it's you'll freeze to death. But I like wandering around and using my pursuit mode, which allows me to fly, which is part of the warden skills.
Mhm.
So I can go up to the top of a mountain and start flying. And as I'm looking around at the zone, you can just see how much detail went into creating the zone with all these large mountains and valleys and stuff like that. It's really cool,
Okay,
which is
that's
totally opposite to the Rahu, which is kind of flat and could use a little bit of work.
yeah. And is that zone one of the higher level zones?
Gazlik and
Mhm.
Rahu, yeah, both of them are higher level.
Okay. Yeah, for some reason I just came back in and I'm still not getting music audio. That is weird.
We'll just have to dub it over later.
Yeah, we'll add some good Mantis music later, guys. Don't worry. So, okay, next one, kind of similar question. What is your favorite dungeon slash boss so far? Whether it be for their mechanic when they kill you and you're stuck with a debuff or anything along those lines, because I know that there's some really interesting ones out there.
Yeah. So I don't want to spoil the debuffs that you get, the curses, so to speak, when you lose to a particular bosses. Some of them are phenomenal. Some of them can elicit some real dread, but for the most part, yeah, it's just for everyone to go out there and discover. As far as my favorite dungeon goes, I really like Wintertide, and I really like um, the Labyrinth. I know this is just interesting dungeons, very interesting layouts, easy to get lost in. But if you jump into either of those with a party that's never been in there,
Hmm.
you you have no idea which direction to go. You can go any direction you want to, slowly start to discover the map. Eventually, you'll complete what you had set out to do by going there, but the dungeons are so grand in scale that you can spend several hours in there before you get to the stuff that you want. And I really like that because in a lot of other MMORPGs, they don't want you to do that. They give you you start out at point A and you
Hmm.
walk down these linear hallways and corridors until you get to point B, which is the boss, and then the dungeon's over.
Hmm.
Here, you jump in, and if you're in a party with other people that are just there for the first time, that's your adventure. Figure it out. Like go
Yeah,
around as soon as the lights start flashing on your screen that you shouldn't that you may or may not be prepared for this boss. Hey, all right, everyone, drink your food. Sorry, drink up, eat some food, get ready. We have no idea what's going to happen, and I think that's the part that's really fun.
definitely. So, side question for this one, how do you feel about the open instance dungeons rather than having the, just the group instance?
Sure. Yeah. So there's been a few other MMORPGs I've played in the past that have open dungeons.
Hmm.
Some of them have been PvE focused, like Project Gorgon. Others have been PvP focused, where you go in there and you can kill the other group and then steal their kills.
Hmm.
Um, I think both of them, they still give you that grand sense that you're not alone in the world. You
Yeah.
go in there with a group. You're you're there to solve whatever your quest is, but as you're progressing, you run into other parties that are also in there. You don't feel excluded from the world. I think that's really cool. The only downside to that is sometimes somebody might need to kill the boss that you need, but because there's these several branching pathways, it works out because you just say, okay, you know what, you go ahead and take this kill. We're going to go a different direction. We're going to focus on another hallway and kill one of the other bosses. And so I really like that interaction with other players, how it continues inside the dungeon. There
Hmm.
haven't been any instances that I can recall where it's somebody's walked in there and like ninja'd your kill and laughed in your face and walked away. The community has been really really friendly, which is nice. And because there's a single server, you can't afford to be an asshole here. Like
True.
you can't jump onto the server and have your persona be an ass. Otherwise, nobody's going to invite you to their groups. That word would spread really fast.
Yeah.
The community lives on several different discords, from the Gorgon head all the way over to the Project Gorgon Discord. All these different discords are shared between the same members, and if one person posts a bad experience about a player, that word's going to travel really fast. So the community as a result tends to be very friendly.
Gotcha.
There's no
Yeah.
hiding. There's no hiding here like you could in other MMOs where you just transfer to another server.
True. Yeah, and I think that's a huge point. So definitely do not try to gank from McKringleberry or the Raekwon in game if you ever see us, because the word will spread very fast, and you can't change servers, so you can never get away from us.
That's right. That's right.
So here are some kind of hypothetical type questions for the potential future of it.
Sure.
If there was a class or maybe a specific weapon that you could add, what would you like to see them add?
Another tough one. There's some good questions in here. Um, Honestly, there's still plenty of weapons in the world of weaponry where they could just add it to the game and have a whole slew of classes.
Mhm.
Um, but because this is an MMO that has creatures, and creatures play so differently from other MMORPGs, I would like to see some other creature added to the game, like maybe a panda bear or a red panda. I'm just throwing out pandas for some reason, but there's other types of animals out there that you can add to the game, and those animals have their own little personalities that could bring with them certain abilities, certain attacks. When you play the rabbit or you play the cow, their abilities are kind of quirky and funny, but they're based off of what that animal does in real life.
Definitely.
And so there's a lot of animals that they could draw inspiration from. And I know Saitan has said that they do have plans to add some animals
Okay.
for later after release. So maybe that's like a hint for an expansion or something like that. But yeah, I'm gonna just say, give us some pandas or something. That'd be cool.
I
I
don't
know some
think.
people have also talked about monitor lizards
Okay.
because they need to have something that's got four legs. So monitor lizards would be cool. I'm down.
Interesting. And I don't think they have any sort of regular bear so far that you can be, right?
No, mm-mm.
Okay. Sweet. Yeah, and for the most part, when I was thinking about this question, I honestly wasn't even thinking about animals, but that makes a ton of sense because I think as far as the weapons, they have most of the quote unquote general weapons and classes from most traditional MMOs. I'm not sure
Yeah.
if I'm missing any, but there's probably one or two that I'm missing.
Well, there's a lot of things that they could still do. I mean, right now we're capped at level 80. They have plans, I think, to take it to 110 later on.
Mhm.
But let's say you've got fire staff and ice staff. Later on, they could add a darkness staff or something like that if they really wanted to. But if they wanted to break away from staves, there might even be some new types of weapons that are coming with the orc class
Oh,
as well as the dwarf class. So there might be some sort of weapons that are unique to them, or weapons that get added to the game that only certain uh, types of classes can use. So
Interesting.
yeah, it should be interesting.
Yeah, that would definitely, because I think at the moment there isn't really any incentive to play, say, fairy or one race instead of another, other than the is it the race specific jewelry? I think there is.
Yeah, I don't really know too much about the Fae. I have not played them myself.
Hmm.
But yeah, there's definitely some things that make them really unique. I know they have less storage space due to their smaller size.
Oh.
But even from the tooltips that you gather from orcs when the game is loading, you get those little tooltips at the bottom.
Hmm.
They mentioned something about orcs not having a love of possessions, so maybe they too will also have a smaller inventory or just carry a lot less.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's kind of cool. The different races do have lots of other distinguishers rather than just a little story.
Gotcha. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. So next one, if there was some sort of game mode or group activity or something else that you could add to the game, what would it be? Like maybe something from that you've seen in previous MMOs or PvP, if that's something that you think they should add, or what would your thoughts be on this?
Oh man, so as far as additional content that they could add, they've done a terrific job with world events where the
Hmm.
GMs will host these different events at different times that people can participate in. But you get in there with you and your group, and uh, it's kind of cliquish. So it's just you and your group doing attacking the monsters and getting credit for the kills. But it'd be kind of cool if they had some sort of a raid event, something that got everybody into the same group, so everybody can heal and buff each other. Um, I don't know. I don't really want there to be PvP. We already have something similar to that in the dungeon that's underneath Serbial. But as soon as they add PvP to a game, you start to have these issues where people are complaining about balance.
Yeah,
They want to see various changes, and that's not what this game is about. So I don't want to see any real types of PvP modes. Um, there's plenty of other games that exist for PvP that we
true.
don't necessarily need the developers to be investing their resources into. So I guess if anything, just more dungeons. Really, I think just having group content for the events, and then more group content as far as dungeons go. 2 nights ago, I got a chance to try the level 85 dungeon for the
Hmm.
very first time. That's the new dungeon in Povis,
Okay.
and I got a sense that it's still incomplete. There's still some work that's going on there, but it's a nice preview of things to come. There's some unique mechanics. The world is actually much better looking than some of the earlier dungeons. So
Okay.
yeah, it'll be interesting to see where it goes.
Awesome. And so when you were talking about raids earlier, did you mean maybe a higher person cap dungeon, like a 10 party dungeon or something
Yeah,
along those lines? Okay.
yeah, and it doesn't necessarily need to be like WoW where you have 40 people, but something that has 10 people,
Yeah.
12 people. If you instead of having six, throw in 12 people into a group and have them work together to conquer these larger bosses and these larger environments,
Hmm.
larger caverns. And who knows, this could be something that's already in the works. And
Yeah.
again, we've got the amount of time that it takes to get from level 60 to level 80 is huge. There's a large time investment for those last 20 levels. Thinking in terms of 80 to 110, that's going to be a long road, and so I could really see them filling that with a lot of journeys and adventures, maybe some larger content like that.
Definitely. Yeah, I think those bigger groups would definitely bring more people in. I feel like, well, apart from the fact that PvP or lack of PvP rather would limit a lot of people from wanting to play this game because obviously a lot of people play MMOs for the PvP aspect. I think having only groups of 6 in the dungeons maybe limits that a little bit too. Not as much as PvP for the most part, but yeah, I think the bigger groups would are definitely a great idea too. I would super enjoy doing that. Feels like you're in a huge party, like the WoW raids you were referencing.
Yeah,
Um,
and I have a large background in PvP MMOs,
yeah,
and I love free for all PvP MMOs where if somebody goes to steal my mining node, I can straight up kill them for
Hmm.
trying to steal my node.
Yep.
Like that's a consequence to their actions, and that's very hardcore in that sense. And then in a lot of those MMOs, if I've killed that player to prevent them from stealing my node, not only are they not going to get the node, but they just lost everything they were carrying because now I can loot their corpse and take everything from them.
Exactly.
So that's a very hardcore penalty on one end of the spectrum. And what winds up happening is when you add PvP experiences like that, the players that feel like they're not able to get ahead, maybe they haven't found a build that's very viable, maybe the balance is not in their favor. When they die repeatedly and keep losing their stuff, they lose the enjoyment of the game and they wind up quitting. And so
Definitely.
for somebody like me, that's maybe I'm farming other players, right? They are my content. When I start farming them, they stop playing. And next thing you know, the player base starts to dwindle really fast. And when you see these other MMOs that start to invest in PvP and PvE content all in the same MMO, it's like they've kind of watered down both content.
Hmm.
So not one PvP feels really good. PvP doesn't feel really good, neither does PvE. It's kind of both of them are so because they've divided their resources. There's
Definitely.
very few MMOs that have managed to pull it off in a way that both of them do really well. So that if all you want to do is PvP, you can have a good time, and if all you want to do is PvE, you can have a good time. And I think with this MMO, with such a small dev team on the road to release this year, finally, I want to see that focus on PvE because it's really the PvE that's made this game so grand.
Hmm.
And to expand upon our current PvE experiences into something that might be a slightly larger, nothing too crazy. Yeah, it could give us some new gameplay opportunities without having to extend to supporting PvE or PvP.
Yeah, that makes sense. And just one more quick thought on this. I feel like without PvP, it's a little bit tough to gauge uh, I guess the tier list of those classes. Do you feel like there's another way that you can kind of gauge that without having PvP in there, like some sort of damage meters for dungeons and stuff like that that they could potentially add?
I never really want to see damage meters. I
Hmm.
know this is something that a lot of players have talked about. We get some players that come in from WoW and they want to see the meters. They want to see how they're doing.
Yeah.
um, you have the ability to click on a corpse that you've killed, and if other people have autopsy, you can see how much you've done. So
Okay.
you can compare how much you've done to other people that are in your party. But what it doesn't tell you is that that person you're comparing to is wearing uh, level 80 gear that's been transmuted to perfection, and so there's no way you're going to be able to come close to the amount of DPS that that person's outputting.
Hmm.
And so those numbers really wouldn't do much for most players anyways. But I also wouldn't really want to see damage meters because I don't want to see that become a dividing factor among the community. I want people to be able to play these weird, fun, unique builds that don't necessarily work. Like I saw some guy the other day. He's making a wolf like a lichen, but he's
Hmm.
using a shield, and he's using some really funky like ability to switch between his loadouts in order to be able to have the shield buff. But that's an option that he had chosen to play, and it's not necessarily like the most viable option, but
Hmm.
it is an option, and he's made it work for himself, and I think that's really cool.
Hmm.
So I don't
Agreed.
really want players to be holden to this. Oh, if you want to do the best DPS, you have to go with this class, or if you want to be the best tank, you have to be this class. I like not having those meters because players can just go in and play the game without having to worry about min maxing everything, and
Definitely.
still feel like they're doing a good job tanking. Still feel like they've got DPS uh, that they're able to DPS things down without having to rely on these numbers that are telling them whether they're good or bad. The other bad thing when it comes to DPS meters is you get these tryhards that if they feel that you're not outputting enough, they just kick you from the group,
Yep.
or they'll forever exclude you from future groups. And that's not very fair because some of these people are using these dungeons to be able to level up new skills or to be able to level up a side class. And so to rely strictly on meters in order to be able to collect that data could really hurt the experience among in PvE among the community.
Totally agree. And yeah, as we were talking about before, I think because the community's so small, if you become known as someone who's not carrying their weight, that would exclude you from word of mouth, people running dungeons not wanting you in their run. And it already seems like for the most part, the core group of vets, yourself included, kind of know each other, know who's good at what. So it seems like it'll be something that progressively people will know people to do this XYZ kind of stuff. So yeah, I agree. I think that's really cool, and PvP would definitely take away from a lot of that, and damage meters would take away a lot from that as well.
And a lot of the stuff is still being shaped.
Mhm.
We're still in early access on Steam. There's a lot of adjustments that are still being made to various classes, a lot of balance changes. We still have new classes that are on the way. Um, there's a huge patch coming this month that I'm super excited for. We're going to be getting mounts. Might get delayed till February, we'll see, but we're going to be getting mounts. And I know people have been waiting for mounts for a very long time, but at the same time, there's a lot of people who have builds that are designed strictly around speed and efficiency. People that can literally travel across the zone at Mach 4. And when this patch comes out, the goal is to try to nerf that, right? They're going to
Mhm.
lose their ability to. Oh, my game just crashed. It does that. Um, they're going to lose the ability to move so fast across the zones. And so the developers are going to spend the next couple of weeks making changes to the mount speed and the players' speed getting nerfed in order to find a happy medium that people are happy with.
Mhm.
So there's going to be a lot of changes coming out over the next couple of months to kind of balance that stuff out. So I wouldn't really think that throwing in PvP um, or even just like a little arenas or something like that for people to go in there and say, oh, that ability is too strong. Nerfing, trying to balance all these different abilities at the same time, it would just be way too much work when there's still so much content that needs to be produced.
True.
I mean, you can even look at Blizzard, and I would arguably say that Blizzard is probably one of the worst companies when it comes to class balances.
Mhm.
So if a massive driving force like Blizzard can't do it, I certainly wouldn't expect it from a two-man dev team.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and like I said, I haven't played too much WoW, but I look at RTS games. I was huge into StarCraft and Warcraft, and there are always so many complaints about balance. And if you have a dedicated team to balance, like Blizzard does, it seems like they should be able to kind of, from a statistical standpoint, do a better job of balancing these games. But yeah, well, back to Project Gorgon. I know we're
Sure.
closing in on the hour mark, so hopefully we have 10 more minutes. I was hoping to keep it around an hour, so let's shoot for that.
That sounds good. Shorter answers, you got it.
No, no, not at all. Perfect. I'm actually coming to the end of the question list, so I think we're on track perfectly.
Okay. Okay. Perfect.
So, if you, on the flip side, if there was something in the game that you think could be or should be removed at all? Or is there maybe some sort of mechanic, a weapon, or anything like that? Is there anything you think should be removed potentially?
The only real thing I would like to see removed are just the little target reticles that appear around every object that you select.
Hmm.
Like when you select things, there's those little squares that
The
kind of
box,
highlight the
yeah.
object you're on. Um, I don't really feel that's needed. I mean, when I click on something, the text's already getting bigger. Um, the the icon already appears down wherever your health bar is, since the whole UI can be reshuffled.
Hmm.
Um, I've in the past couple of weeks, as I've introduced new players to Project Gorgon, a lot of them surprisingly have looked past the graphics really fast. They're like, you know what, it's kind of part of the game's charm, is what they're chalking it up to.
Yep.
But the one thing I've seen a lot of them complaining about are kind of the UI elements. Like, why are things the way they are? So I'd like to see the little reticles be removed. But I mean, that's such a small thing to gripe about. I don't really have any big major complaints. There's probably when you do this interview with some future Project Gorgon characters, I'd be really
Hmm.
curious to see what they have to say, because some of these guys have not put down the game
Yeah.
since they started playing it. They are way more into this game than I am. They know a lot more about the mechanics of the game than I do. I would definitely paint myself as a perpetual novice in this game, where I feel like I'm always stuck at understanding maybe 30 or 40% of the content, and as they continue to add more content, I'm just perpetually stuck there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd be really curious to see what other people have to say.
I think having only played I think maybe 60, 70 hours so far, I think the main thing that I would probably have them try to fix would be um, when you're going through dungeons and you have a group of six and people have pets, it's really hard to loot things on the ground. I feel like I'm constantly right clicking on people's pets and people's UI boxes. So I think that if they added, I know it sounds kind of odd, but I really like the feature of, say, PUBG and some of those battle royale features where you can open up some sort of inventory management slot and it shows you items that are on the ground near you and you can kind of drag them to your inventory. I know that's a little bit of probably what we would say is hand holding, but yeah, that annoyance of trying to pick things up when there are people next to you and you can't click on the mob, especially for example, the reason I bring it up is I was doing one of the casino excursions earlier, and you obviously need to loot the specific items from the bosses in the dungeon, and I was trying to loot the final piece that I needed for one of the bosses, and I couldn't click on the boss to get his loot. I kept clicking on someone's pet, and I ended up dying and couldn't get the piece of loot, and then we had to do the boss all over again. So that would probably be my only suggestion.
Sure. Yeah, and in those cases, generally, yeah, you got to just keep clicking in the same area,
Hmm.
and it does a pretty decent job of like, oh, you didn't mean to target that one. Okay, I'll target the next thing, and then you just keep your mouth still over a corpse and keep clicking, and it'll toggle through the corpses in that pile. But
Gotcha.
yeah, I'm sure there's ways that could be done better. In Darkfall, the way they did it was when you looted something, everything was in a pile, like literally a pile, not a paper doll, a pile, and you had to drag things out of the pile to be able to see what was in there. You kind of rummaged through the loot until you found stuff that was actually useful to you.
Yeah.
But what was interesting with that one is you had to sheathe your weapon, press the button to kneel, open up the bag, and now sift through the bag to find the stuff that you wanted. Stand up, unsheath your weapon, and then go back to what you're doing. It added way too much necessary downtime where it just felt tedious.
Hmm.
So yeah, that'd be interesting to see if they ever change that and how they would go about doing it without it feeling too tedious.
True. Yeah, I do like that where it'll show you the bag of everything on the ground below you. But yeah, I can see how that could be cumbersome having to bend down and basically be out of combat during that time. Because, well, that would eliminate one frustration of people trying to loot while you're fighting a boss. So
Oh
it
yeah,
could be some good things coming from that as well.
yeah, and it'll be really interesting to see how they handle the mounting system too, because at a certain point in time, your speed for getting from one distance to another is faster than the time that it takes for you to mount and then maybe dismount after traversing whatever that distance was.
Yeah.
So we'll see how they plan to handle that and how long it will take for them to balance that.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, so we got two more. So, what do you think could be done to make the game more quote unquote newbie friendly without compromising the features that make this game so unique with the lack of hand holding?
Okay. I'm actually going to borrow one from community member Casgrim here.
Okay.
I think one of the things that should be moved is transmutation. I feel like transmutation is a skill that is learned too late into the game. It's something that holds a lot of value in understanding how that mechanic works very early in the game.
Hmm.
Uh, I've gone out of my way to make sure that as people have joined this game, they get a little bit of an understanding for how to play the game, that I take them to get transmutation so that they can level it up as they go. I show them exactly how to get back there so that as they level up, they can go back there and train the next levels themselves. But it's such an important skill that I would love to see that made accessible earlier on.
Hmm. Yeah, and I just for some context, McKringleberry took me through there to learn transmutation, and it's in a higher level zone. And if any of those mobs touch me, I essentially was getting one-shotted. So yeah, I think the fact that it's in a super high level zone and it's something that you need to level progressively, it would definitely be helpful suggestion for sure.
Now, as far as the new player experience goes, though, like
Hmm.
when you first fire up the game and you're put onto that island,
Yeah.
I actually really like what they've done. I know some people are like, okay, what do I do now? Like they want a little bit of hand holding. They want some dude standing there on the island with a exclamation mark above his head.
Hmm.
I think that right there, the introductory experience that they're giving players lets them know this is not what you think it is. This is not your typical MMO. This is not your WoW clone that has been produced over the last 15, 10 15 years. This is something different. And so when players look around and they see they have so many opportunities to run one direction or another, they can go towards the building on top of a hill. They can go towards the skeleton that's down by the water. They can go check out what's at the dock. It's up to them to decide what direction to go. And I think that right there helps them to understand that this is going to be an exploration experience rather than a complete one quest, then complete the next quest, and then complete the next quest. So I like how they've done that. And for some people, they might play that and just decide this is not for me, and
Hmm.
that's probably one of the best things with their extremely generous free trial system. You download the demo from Steam, you play it, and you've got access to so much content before you decide whether or not this is an MMO that you could continue to invest in.
Hmm.
And I think that just shows that these developers know that what they have is something truly special, because most other developers, I feel, they wouldn't offer such a generous trial of their game,
Yeah.
um, because I mean, let's face it, there's been a lot of really horrible MMOs released over the last 10 years.
You can say that again. And just for an FYI for people who end up watching this video, I initially thought that the demo island was the only content that you get with the demo. But you actually get demo island, Cerbule, and Cerbule Hills, which are the first two huge zones that have so much content in them. Essentially, you could play a ton of the game. It's probably, in retrospect, it's probably still maybe 5 or 10% of the game because it's so huge. But yeah, you can play a ton of content with just the demo. So go ahead and try it out for sure. So
Yeah, be sure to put a link to that in the description. I'm sure people
yes,
would love that.
yeah, good call. Check below, and I'll definitely put a link to the description as well as to the Gorgon, the Project Gorgon Discord. So last question. Well, it's not really a question, but first of all, thank you for being our first guest, and thank you for showing me this game. First of all, because it's an amazing game. But is there anything that you want to chat about or touch on that we didn't get to talk about, or maybe give some shout outs to anyone out there?
Yeah. So actually, just a huge shout out to the entire Project Gorgon community. There's some monumental efforts that are being made in the background to be able to understand new mechanics, document new mechanics. Um, but on top of that, they're just genuinely friendly people. I've
Hmm.
played so many MMORPGs, countless, that are just filled with people that are less than savory. They say things that are less than savory. You group with people that are less than savory. You'll have a block list that the game has told you, sorry, your block list is full because they're filled with so many horrible people.
Hmm.
That's not the case in this MMO. Ever since I first started, I ask a question, you get help from other people. If you say, hey, I'm struggling to kill this person, could you help me out? 9 times out of 10, if they're not busy, or if they're not, sorry, I've got to go pick up my kid from school, they're going to group with you and they're going to help you with what you asked.
Hmm.
Yesterday, I wasn't able to buy a cheese making book because I was stuck in my Fox form, and I just asked another player, "Hey, could you do me a favor and just buy this book for me?" Without questions, he went over there, he bought the book for me, and that was that. I gave him a little tip there as a thanks, but the whole community is so incredibly friendly that once you jump in, it kind of it holds you in because you feel like you're part of the one big family.
Mhm.
And that's something that I feel is really missing from today's MMOs, where that sense of community gameplay, that sense of group gameplay and working together, that's been lost throughout the years. And Project Gorgon really brings that back, and I love it. So huge thanks to the Project Gorgon community. You've all been very helpful to me throughout the years. You've been very helpful to our latest members in the guild. Several of them have had several positive interactions with many of you. Many of you that you don't even know have gone out of your way to help them.
Mhm.
They've noticed that. So that's it. That's pretty much all I have to say. Huge thanks. I love everybody here.
Awesome. So, before we go to closing stuff, just if you ever see McKringleberry in the server, say what's up. Ask him for some thigh rubs, definitely. Thank you everyone for watching the thank you everyone for watching the first episode of Gorgon Head podcast. Next week, I believe we're going to have Plaximos, who's another veteran. If
Awesome.
I'm super excited about that one as well. If you have any questions that you'd like to see me ask our guests, please comment them. And if you have any suggestions for future potential guests on the show, please let me know. I've already gotten a couple on my list that I need to reach out with that Mr. McKringleberry has given me. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Have a great one and happy hunting in Project Gorgon.